alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Shaping Tomorrow. I'm Shafiq Burhanuddin, Senior Research Officer at IKIM. And with us in this episode is a very esteemed guest and a dear friend of ours, all the way from England, is Sheikh Mus'ab Penfound. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a great honor to be here, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, allow us to briefly read out the profile of our guest. Mus'ab Penfound was born and raised in England, Manchester. After a 2-year journey, he entered Islam at the age of 18. Since 2005, after an interim period at the University of Manchester, attaining a degree in Arabic language and history, he's been living in the Muslim world with time spent in the lands of both Egypt and Southern Arabia. On his travels, he has been studying full-time under a variety of scholars, each with an unbroken chain of scholarly transmission back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His main teacher is distinguished alim scholar Al-Habib Umar bin Muhammad bin Hafiz, where Sheikh Mus'ab has received Habib Umar's guidance and tutelage in the renowned Islamic school in Hadramaut, Yemen, called Darul Mustafa. He has also been studying under other renowned scholars in Darul Mustafa, such as Sheikh Umar Al-Khatib, Habib Umar bin Abdullah Al-Idrus, Habib Musa Kadhim Al-Saqaf, and among others. He's also accredited to teach the traditional Islamic sciences. As for his areas of interest, it includes the sacred law, the science of inward purification, and on top of that, he travels regularly and has taught and lectured in the UK, in the Middle East, South Africa, and Comoros Islands. Currently, Sheikh Mus'ab lives in Hadramaut, I believe, yes. And where he is continuing his studies under the tutelage of his teachers, and according to his profile, he's also the trustee of Al-Rafah Charitable Society, which is a foundation, I believe, founded by his teachers.
Yes.
So, but to begin with, Sheikh, maybe you could share with us, how did you arrive at this path? You're from Manchester, England, and we've read that you've converted, but perhaps in a very limited time, but how can you share with us, how did you embark on this path to begin with?
Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. It's always a great lesson, I feel, to kind of, the gift of retrospection, to look back into one's life. And one of the best things that I've heard in a general sense, in drawing lessons from our own lives, is there are always these threads, these prominent threads, and how those things are woven and tied together in order to draw meaning from our lives can differ in the way that the person we're speaking to. I think for brevity of time, I was raised in a secular environment in Manchester, fairly well educated kind of background, and nothing particularly abnormal about my upbringing. I had a great love for music. My grandfather had a great love for language, and that, being the conduit of transferal of meaning was always something that really interested me. I don't think I was actively seeking anything, but once again, retrospectively, perhaps I just wasn't able to express it in that way. And it was really through human interaction, spending time with people, interacting with Muslims, and just seeing their behavior and their conduct and their smiles. I mean, sometimes we look for the big things, but these small things are actually, these kind of sources of inspiration.
You said the Muslims in Manchester.
The Muslims in Manchester. I mean, the particular area where I'm from in Manchester, there were no Muslims. It was all, English people, non-Muslim English people, some nominal Christians, but predominantly secular, religion not being a part of our modern experience of life. But a group of these guys came through just prior to going to university, studying A-levels, and just interaction with them, it's just very inspiring, which led me to deepen and to explore fasting, for example, as a spiritual practice. When I did that's really what brought me into Islam, just what that led to.
Well, was it a conscious decision for you to study Arabic at University of Manchester?
Well, I studied Arabic at the University of Manchester after becoming Muslim. Right. So I'd say there definitely was it was intentional as a tool to deepen that experience. I mean, the experience of faith is very profound when a person becomes Muslim. Although the journey doesn't end there, that initial tipping point when you come into the fold of Islam is very, at some level, overwhelming. And Arabic being this sacred tool for preservation and a key in many respects for unlocking the beauty and the breadth of our tradition, at some level it was conscious, but I also felt for me it was necessary. I had to do this. I couldn't, just see through the pane glass in the window. I had to, attain the key and experience something of what was going on behind that door.
But perhaps you could share also how did you manage to make this jump to Yemen, all the way very far away from your hometown, to further your study in Yemen, just so that we can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, could I articulate it as a conscious decision? I felt in many ways I was drawn there, and what I mean by that is, it was very much. The early days of my journey of understanding Islam, the kind of hustle and bustle of Manchester was such that it was hard to kind of differentiate between what was authentic, what was projecting itself as an authentic teaching, but maybe had some elements of counterfeit. And I think my quest after experiencing the beauty of coming from a very secular worldview to something where the existence of the Creator permeates into your everyday life, I wanted to make sure that was always referenced in authenticity. Okay. And there are many places on earth, there are many great people in Manchester that have the means to articulate that, but Yemen being this great bastion of a classical, holistic, traditional form of education was really what drew me.
I believe you've been you studied in Yemen for almost 10 years, is this correct?
I mean, I'm still currently studying it. Also, it relates to that worldview, it's the idea of the cradle to the grave, so, yeah.
Okay, so, but maybe you can share with us, based on the number of years you studied there, what has been the experiences like, and Darul Mustafa is maybe not known to many people, but I think for those who are following the circles of Islamic discourses, they are aware this Darul Mustafa is a rising institution that has nurtured and produced many inspiring personalities such as yourself. So, can you perhaps tell us more about Darul Mustafa?
Okay. Well, Darul Mustafa was really institutionalization of a sacred tradition, an authentic tradition of a scholarship, with unbroken, authorized chains, this link all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it really came in a time which, in the context of that region, suffered greatly from an onslaught of not only secular thought, but the kind of avidly atheist, religious and political agenda expressed through communism. What that meant is so much of the kind of the sophistication within the intellectual tradition of the area was literally decompartmentalized and often actively, the attempt was made to destroy it. Right. So it serves as this revival, if you like, of a classic tradition within a contemporary context. There will be, because it is a classical place of learning, it's holistic, by which I mean there is that academic component, which kind of, nourishing and intellectually and in terms of its application in the world, but you also have the focus on the spirit and the soul. And I think for me that was also one of the things that really attracted me, that it wasn't just kind of 4 years worth of training of mental gymnastics. It was activating something about you and how that relates to the mind. And as modern people, I felt that was something that we're really lacking. Yes. My experience also within a Western institution was just the stark difference between the two. I mean, the juxtaposition between this and that was very stark. Even in terms of the relationship with the teachers, the teachers, there's this one of the titles of the tradition is Madrasat al-Abawiyah, so it's this fatherly type nurturing of the student. It's not just their kind of how well they do in a test and that gets sent off to some kind of analytic think tank, but in terms of what is to be an erudite scholar, what is the progression of this person's comport and manners, and in order to cradle that knowledge. And I think that really echoes the tradition of classical learning, even within Western culture. I mean, if you look, even the Oxford universities now, they do place a prevalence on etiquette and these things, the handing over of the pen, that symbolic handing over, it's not meaningless.
Right.
It's done for a reason, and it has an impact in the way that knowledge is digested, and also the way ultimately it's projected in a broader world view. And I think when scholarship becomes merely about attaining a piece of paper to get a job, or for whatever reason, there's something fundamentally flawed about that. And that's been my experience of Dar al-Mustafa. It's really, it breathes back that meaning into knowledge, that it becomes now transformative.
Beautiful. Also, I think we're very interested to know about your teacher, your main teacher, Habib Umar bin Hafiz. He's a very renowned figure. He's been listed by this, I think this survey of 500 most influential Muslims among the, I think, easily top 10, if I can recall correctly. Also, of course, as not only is he a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, but he also he receives the scholarly unbroken chain of scholarly transmission to the Prophet ﷺ. So, can you tell us more about Habib Umar as a teacher, and how has your educational experiences with him has shaped you as a person?
Without being overly sentimental, I find that question very challenging to answer authentically. I think in many ways, it's like asking how describe one's own father. What aspect? Well, this is what he did in his work. This is how he was when he was at home. This was how he was amongst his friends. And because the idea of a classical scholar is more of an inheritor of the tradition, of the prophetic legacy, it's not just within the classroom. So my experience of Habib Umar, for example, is often some of those profound lessons were sitting in his company, having lunch, and just the subtlety of his etiquettes and his manners, and infused with knowledge. I mean, it comes from a source of, once again, it's transformative, and just experiencing this, and people coming. I'm here now with a close friend from Sweden who recently came, and his experience also, and I think we can't underestimate how profound that is. People coming from a postmodern, highly secular, European, urban climate, to still find such a source of inspiration, not only spiritually, but in terms of just practical things in life. When you see the example in front of you, it's inspiring. It shows that there is a way that this tradition is still living. And one of the most powerful moments that I experienced was we were going to his house for a lesson after the Dhuhr prayer. And one of the people that kind of manages, that takes care of the kind of guest area of his house, said that, look, there won't be a lesson today. What turned out was it was one of the most profound lessons. What he did is he's actively gone and found the people that were never invited to places in the town and invited them to his house. People that had maybe some physical disability, they weren't able to attend, incredibly poor, without family, people that kind of, society were just kind of discarded, not. So he made the active decision to bring them. And one of the most powerful moments I've ever had was having the opportunity and really the honor of washing their hands before the meal. After giving them this wonderful meal and just embracing them, he gave them each a gift individually. There was a book, and there was no live feed to this event. It wasn't, there were no cameras. It was just a very real experience of humanity. And what I heard actually is the person that told us that there'd be no lesson today, he said that Habib Umar had actually placed a sum of money discreetly inside every single one of the books. Now, the people receiving it would only understand that upon it returning back home.
Okay.
But it's that sincerity, that expression of humanity. To me, that's what Habib Umar represents, that, what it means to be human. And that's what it means to be an inheritor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And I think it's very interesting also, Mustafa, like any great Muslim institutions, they're built on the scholarly tradition of the scholars of the past.
Yes.
Because I think now we are living in a time where a lot of our past masters are somewhat neglected or suppressed, are not duly appreciated anymore.
Absolutely.
Well, I think perhaps even the Western tradition are still appreciating their great scholars, but perhaps we could do more, in the Muslim world. But in the case of Darul Mustafa, it is very much alive, a living tradition, as for the discourses of the scholars from the past.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us some of the reference or the scholars of the past, or that you are building, that your teachers are building on in Darul Mustafa.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I really like the way you talk about that. We've kind of detached from this tradition, but understanding we're the ones that are actually missing out.
Yeah.
There's a reason why these things were preserved and they stood the test of time. And I think before going into that, I think as a Western person, why do we need tradition? Like, it's about progress. But I think integral to an authentic worldview, which is meaningful and authentically progressive, we have to draw from ancient wisdoms, and we're not detached from those annals of previous history. We have the concept of standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes, right.
If we're just kind of standing, we don't need that anymore. We'll just start it from the foundation. That foundation was there for a reason. That's one thing. The second thing that I also found very interesting coming from the background which I came from, was the plurality and the magnanimity in which it wasn't just about our scholars. It wasn't a clique.
Right.
What was taking place in the school that I learned in wasn't a kind of, we do things our way. It's actually, we would study from, you could learn fiqh from Imam Shirazi, who's from Persia,
right,
modern day Iran.
Right.
Imam Ghazali, from Balkh, in modern day Afghanistan.
Yes.
But also trained and has been one of the great professors of the Nizamiya.
Yes.
And then you'll have the local tradition as well. You'll have people from various regions of northern Yemen, also Syria, from Morocco. I mean, Habib Umar, in a recent, really amazing kind of series of talks, was unpacking the meanings of sacred poetry from the diwan of a Moroccan scholar.
Right.
So that's another thing that I found really, really beautiful, that they have a particular method and a way, but it's not exclusive to and I think as modern people we need to benefit from that. We're often talking about tolerance.
Right.
Tolerance is quite a harsh word. It says, I'll tolerate you, I'll put up with you. But really what we need is to kind of embrace and learn with principles. This is how real knowledge is augmented. You have the likes of Al-Imam Ghazali, who is profound, and it interestingly mentioned as well how much the Western world the Muslim world, if you like, has neglected that, whereas the Western world, I mean, this inspired great Western works.
Yes.
And I think we need to really revive that tradition and not be scared of that. I mean, a post-colonial kind of like apprehension of going back to our tradition. We need to really stand up and know the greatness of this tradition. I mean, the Pope was sending people to, southern Spain to train under Muslim scholarship. And as the head of Catholicism, like, he wasn't doing that, because he had to, but there was a reason why that was done.
Actually, we want to hear more about your thoughts. But you mentioned about ideas of progress there. But before we go there, there's a very interesting involvement of yours, which we thought would be very beneficial for us to learn about. Is your position or appointment as a trustee of Al-Rafah Charitable Society.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about it? I mean, what are the projects that you embarked on in this charity and so on?
This is, I mean, the charity has been running for many years now, as an official registered charity, and prior to that, one could say it has extended all the way back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because it's a methodology also based upon integrity. So one of the principles that really attracted me was also there is a 100% donation policy, and they're almost insanely rigorous in this regard. In a modern kind of business plan, a lot of it doesn't make sense in that regard, but things have worked. And this concept of barakah, blessing, which is authentically Islamic, that we do believe in the unseen, and we do believe in these channels of assistance which come from these places, are really important whilst having a structure. And I think in terms of the formal structure, it really kind of they were very much keen about getting serving people on the ground. It doesn't get used up in administrative costs, or it trickles down, and when it gets to the people that are really in need, but it's minimal. So people will actually go out and serve people. One of the great experiences that I had was actually the honour of going on Eid to the houses with packs of meat. It's not this kind of like, I'll type in a number online and send in the the thing. It's this reviving this prophetic principle of charity. So coming from the West, where we have meat, just like in Malaysia, I mean, there's a strong food culture in KL, but we're not appreciative. That's a blessing. Most of the world does not experience that. And just the idea of having meat. There's this one boy that, he ran out in tears, because the last time he had meat was when it was delivered to him the previous Eid. Now, that is transformative, and that's why I feel as though it's part of that, holistic legacy of knowledge. They also have because Yemen being a very poor place, if you're asking poor people to give money, it's, they're the ones which they need to be on the receiving end. But once again, the Prophet ﷺ, to give, even if it's a part of a date, even if it's a smile, and that spirit, I thought was very authentic to our tradition. So they have a daily, even if you just give it would be like, a quarter of a ringgit or something like this, but just the principle that you become a giving person, and that spirit is revived. Now, being appointed as a trustee, the work is taking place primarily on an international scale in order to revive these principles and this kind of real spirit in a broader sense. I'm really looking forward to that.
It's interesting how you related these experiences with this charity, and the economic and developmental nature of the program is intimately linked with your spiritual development and so on.
Absolutely.
So it's very interesting.
Well, I found that really interesting as a Muslim, the way that there is, if it's understood properly, there is no dichotomy between our experience of the world on a social level in terms of community, our family life, the way we raise our children, and an inward spiritual state. The word spiritual, I only mean in terms of, it's that which pertains to the spirit, the soul, the ruh. And as Muslims, we absolutely believe in this. But it's how these two work in tandem. And, this principle that we look to the root, not the fruit. Often when even from an Islamic paradigm, to make something Islamic, it's that we put the shell of it on, but the soul is dwindling. So within this process, you're looking not only as in that people are receiving money, which is good, but how is it given? What is the state of the heart? It's even the prophetic etiquette of whenever you give money, you don't put it from the top hand down, that you place that money with your palm upwards, because the person who is taking it is actually helping you, like purify your wealth, raise to Allah. What an amazing worldview, and that to me was just so inspiring, and something that I felt is worthwhile sharing.
Now, we are in the final phase, I believe, of our very blessed conversation. Going back to what you said about this idea of progress, I think in this day of age, when we think of progress and development, is very much fixed to the material life, material matters. But interesting how you have linked this with your experiences working in this charitable organization. But perhaps in about this limited time we have, what's your thoughts and perhaps your advice to many modern Muslims out there who are very much attached with the modern material world, most of the time without much choice,
absolutely.
How do you think they can embark on a more spiritual journey in their lives in this day of age? When you talk about progress and development, also these concepts being imposed on them and so on. But perhaps what's your thoughts on this in this day of age?
Yeah, I think a real conundrum that many of us find just in daily life, in the world in which we live in, is we're often inundated by words in which the meanings we don't fully understand or even have the opportunity or time to reflect upon. Now, words are important because they signify the conveyance of meaning and the transmission of an understanding. But when we're inundated by words which are not only materialistic but have an agenda, a highly hyper-consumerist agenda, it destroys something of what it means to be human. So the idea of development, I find it interesting because in classical texts you'll hear the term like riyada in the Arabic language. Riyada meant development, but it was a training of one's character and behavior, so much so that it impacted the soul and led to a transformation. That's why there was the caliber of scholarship which you had, because it was rooted in such an integrity. If we look at some of the kind of classical manuscripts within our tradition, I don't like the term secular fields because they weren't, but the kind of formal religious sense. So, like in the field of medicine, almost the prologue would take up almost half the book, and it was this scholar talking about how much he strived against his own ego to develop and progress to a place of absolute objectiveness and integrity. That's real science, not pseudoscience. Pseudoscience is we use technical terms and nomenclature in order to convey something which is actually quite egotistically rooted. Now, I think the great thing about our tradition as Muslims is we still have this intense, this preservation, and it's so profound. I mean, if you read about the nature of the preservation of the Quran, the preservation of the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ and his teachings, it's incomparable to any world tradition. I can say that unequivocally. Where do you have something that has that level of tawatur and that unadulterated, multitude of reports? So the source is still there. How to access that can be challenging. And I think it's just taking 5 minutes out of one's day and start to become like more reflective human beings. It's interesting, mindfulness now in the West is very, very, very popular. And that's something it's just stopping and appreciating that you're alive and you feel things and there are smells and there's just almost like revitalize that sensory perceptions now, because if we're not really living, how can we experience the world? I mean, we're progressing, but in many ways we're actually digressing. We're going off on a tangent. There's like this hyper development. We're almost mutated. We've over-evolved intellectually. And what that means is you get the likes within the UK, certain statistics point that almost a quarter of the population suffers from some form of psychological illness. Where's the progress?
Malaysia is catching up.
Oh, really?
Apparently, according to the latest statistics, 4.5 Malaysians are suffering from some form of mental health.
And that's really sad, particularly within an area of the world which was such a great bastion and a great template for that holistic knowledge. I mean, visiting some profound academics and scholars here in KL, you can see that balance because they've drawn from both traditions, and it's one tradition in its essence. And I think just having access to that is really important. We need to be cautious that our approach to our faith is not just one about how we project ourselves to the outward people. Meaning, it's not just about what we wear. It's not about what we say. Inna Allah la yanzur ila suwarikum wa la ila ajsadikum walakin yanzuru ila qulubikum. Indeed, Allah does not look at your image. Allah can see it, but it's not what Allah is interested in. That innate value is that which Allah sees in your heart. And that's why we all have that opportunity right now to make an intention and reapproach our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is what it's all about. I mean, progress and development. At the end of the day, if we build the greatest things societally, but we haven't rectified the heart, we are people that believe in implications which are eternal.
Yes.
That eternality has to be rooted in something which is meaningful, and that's why Allah says that none will be saved on that day except the one that comes to Allah bi qalbin salim, with a sound heart.
Yes. Actually, Sheikh Musab, I want to go back to a point that we spoke of before the interview, which was how you related in one of your talks here that in places like Yemen, even for companies pertaining to coffee and honey, there is awqaf there. Because when they think of development or economics, these things are taken into consideration, because these are important for their for their life. But you can share with us more about
I just found it fascinating, because we had this exchange over a coffee, and we both share a love for coffee, but coffee originated in Yemen, and it was to facilitate that kind of intellectual and spiritual conversation. It wasn't the point, but it was that conduit by which those things started to flow. And the society is so refined that they had awqaf, the endowments, for the honey in the coffee. There was a specific religious institution which took care of sweetening your beverage. I just found that really profound, because it wasn't to the detriment of the poor or it was that was so well taken care of that it was so sophisticatedly that was facilitated, which is a sign of progress and development in that sense, and we need those things to remind us of our humanity. We're not robots. We need to have those exchanges, and just the lost art of human conversation is something which I think we can really draw from those. When my father went to, alhamdulillah, he converted to Islam along with my mother when because he came to Yemen, and as a middle-aged Englishman, it was a very different world to that experience coming to there. And one of the first experiences he had is sitting in this wonderful plate of food and hospitality, and somebody literally grabbed some meat and placed it in his mouth. Now, that doesn't happen where I'm from, but initially there's that kind of English awkwardness, but then it's like, wow, that's actually wonderful, because there aren't these kind of awkward inhibitions which we've developed as modern beings. They're very much at ease with people, and it's not intrusive.
Sure.
They're very respectful. But the fact that, on another note, I remember, people would give salam across the street, assalamu alaikum, and my father would be like looking around as if, who are they speaking to? And I said, Dad, they're speaking to you. And he's like, wow, but they don't even know me. I'm like, yeah, but that is progress. That's a heart which has the magnanimity it's not worried about what's on the receiving end. And we both joke, because coming back to Manchester, you put that into practice and people think he's trying to start a fight or something. There's a different agenda. But I still think that is, we need to draw from our, the sources of courage and inspiration, because that's something that needs to be spread. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Afshu salam bainakum, spread peace amongst you. In its principles, in its philosophy, but also in just giving salam, saying assalamu alaikum. It's a dua, an incredible great greeting. Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim is a divine greeting. And we shouldn't be shy of that as Muslims. So these simple things are, really, really profound. Like the honey and the coffee, that's sophistication. And what's interesting also is, in English and in Western culture now, there's a much more of they're going back to kind of an artisanal approach to things like coffee.
Right.
Instead of just dumping a spoon of Nescafe, they have the process, and you have all these kind of niche coffee shops now, because people love the process. It's not just, okay, where's this coffee from? How is it ground? How is it prepared? I want to see it prepared. There's something innate about that process which the human heart inclines towards, that kind of craft. And I've always found that very inspiring. And, I think it just reminds us something about what it means to be human, which is useful every once in a while.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been with Sheikh Musab Penfound, trustee of Rafah Charitable Society, and also a dear student of a great alim from Hadramaut, Yemen, Mustafa Habib Omar bin Hafiz. Thank you once again.
Thank you. It's been a great honor. Thank you.
With that, wabillahi tawfiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.